Stereotypes. They're everywhere. Nice mohawk and crust pants, but name every punk band ever. Nice trad goth makeup, but name every goth person ever. Were you at the local gig last night? Pfft, you're a poser. You're just a walking stereotype, said the man-child that looks like if you drew any commentary / video essay channel ever. Or as you guys say, I look like a poor man's Curtis Connor or an Australian iDubbbz, which is hysterical as I'm British. Anyway, stereotypes. They're everywhere, and today we're talking about it. But before I get into that, hello, my name is Life, and on this channel we do video essays where we talk about things on the internet and then we all discuss it as a team down in the comments. So if that sounds like fun for you, please feel free to subscribe, as the majority of people that watch my videos aren't ruddy subscribed. And we've got to do something about that, haven't we, gang? And if you're not new here, hello again, friends, it's me, your boy, Life. And I'm doing rootin' tootin' darn good, I want to say. Slight sore throat, but other than that, we balling. Well, not really balling, but more or less I'm pretty good. But we do digress. Welcome to our latest exploration into the world of TikTok, where creativity and passion collide in very exciting ways, as you can tell by the tone of my voice. Yes. And today we're going to be diving into the world of stereotypes and how they influence sub-movements. From the classic punk with the leather jackets and the spiked mohawks, to the free-spirited hippie dancing around with tie-dye and beads. These stereotypical images are often the faces that represent sub-movements on applications like TikTok. Why? Because they're just like the easiest ways to be like, oh yeah, that's a hippie, or yeah, that's a punk, and it resonates with everybody. It's very easily packaged and consumable. Not like actually consumable, just like mentally like taking it in and processing what it is. Don't eat your TikTok phone. But what I'm trying to get at is, what does it mean when these profiles are the ones that get the most views? Like, what does it represent for society? Are these stereotypes just harmless fun, or do they hold deeper implications? That's right, your chronically online friend Life is going to unpack all of this, exploring the pros and cons, like how they can help with self-image and self-exploration, but also on the darker side, maybe also promoting misconceptions and promoting exclusivity, which is whack, yo. It's always inclusivity over exclusivity every time. We'll look at how, like, you know, these stereotypes affect the identities of others within sub-movements, the potential of commercialization and the dilution of the OG core values of these sub-movements, and even the impact on self-esteem and mental health. So join me for this very chronically online dive into stereotypes on TikTok that doesn't really affect your day-to-day life at all, but probably while you're eating dinner, it's something interesting to think about. So first, as always, to bring everybody up to speed so we're all on an equal playing field, I'm just going to show a few case studies quickly of different stereotypes at play in different sub-movements on TikTok. So kicking things off, we got the hippies of TikTok. And the two big hitters on hippie TikTok are these two people. And I know what you're saying, some of you might be like, Cal, these are not real hippies. And yes, I've done whole videos on people like this, but today we're not really talking about that. We're kind of talking about stereotypes and what they represent. For example, this person looks like if $1 billion corporation was like, yeah, we made hippie, yo. This is what you get, some person that sings and raps about doing ayahuasca and pyramids. And apparently it's all linked to white supremacy concepts, which is a pretty scary thing. But you wouldn't really get that at face value, I don't think. You'd probably just think, classic middle class person just freeballing any loadout they want because they have no real social pressures in life. Then, of course, we've also got this person who got a lot of heat online because everyone was like, yo, you're really privileged. But then lots of people also pointed out how this type of home is pretty typical in Europe, you know. But they were wearing clip-on locks, which is also a point of controversy. But again, they look pretty gosh darn hippie-ish. If you typed in hippie, they tick all the boxes. The baggy trousers, the bright colours, it's all there. That's a TikTok hippie. Moving on from there, we've got punks. And when you think of punks in the UK, you're hit with the Camden zombie punk. And Zooey Mama, is there a lot of controversy surrounding this human, which you can look at in your own free time if you want to. But for now, we'll just say, look, leather jacket, mohawk, anarchy, Zooey Mama, that's a punk, right? Or at least to the normal person, the average Joe that just scrolls on TikTok, they'll be like, oh yeah, punk, look at that, punk, anarchy. And you know, lots of people when they're in Camden, London, all go and get a photo with the zombie punk because they're like, yeah, look, punk, haha, that's so funny, yo. Another big hitter in the alternative community who labels themselves a punk, emo, rocker. They change whatever they hashtag every week, and they seem to be trying to appeal to a different demographic every week, is TX2. You know, the person that was famous for the I'm a 5'4" man, boop, that, boop, his wrists. Crazy lyrics, but, you know, some people say it's a bar. These are the faces that are pushed to the front for TikTok that, you know, the average Joe will see and they'll be like, oh, so that's what punk is. Oh, so that's what emo is, you know? This is what they're going to see realistically, not the actual people, because perhaps the other people that are actually in the scene don't always look that way. They're not Instagram or social media ready, so they're not the ones that are as easily consumed by people that aren't in the know. The only people that are going to be consuming that content are the people that are actually in that demographic, which isn't the whole world. It's very much niche, which is a dilemma. Somebody should phone Nelly. That's a great joke, because in Nelly's discography, there's a song called Dilemma. We do digress, let's get back on point. Again, I'm not going to do super deep analysis of each of these creators in this video because we've already done videos on TX2 and on the hippies. If you want to watch them, please feel free to. But if you're just mainly interested in stereotypes, let's keep this trainer going. Choo choo. Next up, goths. With goths, we've got this lovely content creator, and they're in trad goth makeup, the heavy goth makeup. If you type in goth on TikTok, this is the sort of person you will see up first. This type of goth, because it's like, oh yeah, that's obviously goth, and goth actually comes in many shapes, sizes and forms and different aesthetics and ways. Basically what I'm trying to say there is goth isn't just this. It's not just this at all. It's actually a very complex movement, as I did a video on recently. But this is like the obvious standard for what an average Joe might think goth is if they just had to draw one off the bat or draw one from their head. And also I just want to say this content creator is super lovely. They commented on my goth video and they were really nice about it. And they do lots of great informative videos for baby bats, which is like newcomers to the goth movement, on how to get into it. So if you want to check them out, feel free to, you know. They seem like a really nice content creator from what I've seen online. But hopefully with all of this, you're starting to see like the profiles that get pushed the most in social media are like the most like commercialized. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like they're the most social media ready versions of those sub movements. And yes, some of these content creators will have videos where they're just looking like their regular 9-to-5 work self, but you know, those videos don't always necessarily get as many views because they're not as social media ready. And what I mean by that is the average person isn't gonna be like, yo, whoa, punk, unless you've got your mohawk and your crust pants and like your battle jacket on or your leather jacket on, or if you're not in your trad goth makeup, they're not gonna be like, oh yeah, that's a goth. They'll just be like, oh, that's a vaguely alternative person or whatever. To be fair, the average normal person just puts all alternative people, or at least alternative femme-presenting people, in the same basket, which is not a good thing at all. But they're like, yeah, goth girl, goth girl. My brother in Earthly Bounds, that is not a goth. Crazy one still. And I know if you're from one of these sub-movements and you've seen these people and you're like, hold up, Cal, those aren't punks at all. Like, you know, like, TX2 isn't punk. Yes, I know. I completely agree with you. But for the average person, if TX2 hashtags punk, this is what they're going to be greeted with. And because of the type of character TX2 is and the way he plays social media so well and gets so much engagement, that is what they're going to think is punk when they see punk, you know? And it's all very face value, because it doesn't really tell you anything about the movement. It just looks the commercialized way, so it must be good, right? And at face value, yes, I agree. It's pretty freaking harmless. But, you know, if you look a bit deeper than that, it is actually pretty problematic, according to the people from these sub-movements, because it actually takes away from the meaningfulness of it all. You know, which I have to agree with. But before we get onto the old cow just moaning about things on the internet, let's talk about the pros of these stereotypes. And again, I do want to stress, that doesn't mean I'm condoning what, you know, some of these people do online. I'm not at all. It's just like, how at a base level, if you're just a normie consuming this content or whatever, or you're just a regular person that isn't looking at it really deeply and you're not getting taken in by all their ideologies, how this content can actually be beneficial and, you know, good for society. So, kicking things off with point one, visibility and awareness. These appearances that are considered maybe perhaps stereotypical can actually be very good at like boosting awareness of your sub-movement, because they are very social media ready and they're very interesting to look at. Therefore, people will engage with them, right? So when people see these really iconic looks like a punk or a hippie, they're drawn to it because you're like, oh, that's so different from the norm. That's challenging the status quo. And it's packaged very well. I'm gonna interact with it, you know? And that in turn piques interest. And that in turn, it's like a cycle of things, can create greater interest in that sub-movement. And this is where the interesting conversation happens. So they may use this person as their gateway into the hippie movement, you know, which is all about spreading peace, love, and being good to the world or whatever. And yes, if you look deeper at some of her stuff, you may be like, yeah, what she's preaching is actually bad. But if they use this content creator as like the starting point, and then they do other research into the hippie movement or into spirituality in general, right? That amazing thing, they can actually learn good, useful things, and they may take a step away from that content creator. But for the fact that they were there in the first place, it's almost like this very easily digestible stepping block to get into this movement, which I'm always super for, because I think a big thing is like when people want to join these sub movements, as I've seen from my comments in my most recent videos, I've been exploring a lot of these sub movements, is they want to, but they just don't know how. So it's almost like these very stereotypical versions can just be great starting points. And also I just do want to stress again that not all people that are stereotypes or whatever doesn't mean it's a bad thing whatsoever. Like the goth one, great content creator from what I'm saying, really helpful, trying to help new people get into the scene. It can be a great thing that you look a bit like the stereotype. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing, you know? And it can be a great tool for getting people in, because it's almost like you're the poster person for it. Look how cool it can be. Look how cool the self-expression is. Now, with that self-expression comes these other really cool things, like maybe with the punk movement, it's the do everything yourself culture, where you thrift, where, you know, you're anti-capitalism, you're against the machine, you're all about inclusivity over exclusivity. All these really amazing, you know, great values to have, great values to instill in young minds. They may see these very obvious forms of punk, and that's how they get into it. And, you know, through that, I think that leads to like cultural education, because all it takes is like one curious mind to see like the hippie or the punk or the goth or whatever sub-movement it is, and then they maybe just Google it, and they might read the Wikipedia page. And I'm not saying the Wikipedia page is like the most authentic place to learn about things. Obviously, that one of the best ways is to be parts of the local communities, go to the local events and actually mix with others, swap ideas and learn from them. But not everybody might be brave enough to do that from the get-go, or they might not just have access to that sort of thing. They might not have the transport or the infrastructure to do those things. So online is a great resource. So they might just type in hippie or goth or punk, and they can learn the basic tenets, basic information about what it means to be those movements. It's more than just the aesthetics that got them in originally. There's values to it and everything, which is really cool and awesome. I don't think stereotypes have to always be a bad thing. They can be seen as these like positive ways, these big beacons, these big obvious beacons for people to explore and learn. And I think it's very important, especially for minds that do want to like find themselves, because this is what all life is about. It's just like one big old messy journey of self-exploration, and you don't always get it right, and you might try different aesthetics, you might be part of different movements until you find one that really resonates well with you. It's almost important just having these big poster people that are there that you can be like, oh, that's cool, I want to learn more about that faction, but maybe don't learn everything you do about that faction or movement from that person, because they might not say everything's right. And I'm saying that again because I just want to stress that doesn't mean I condone anything some of these people are saying. Like, I really don't condone anything Camden Punk is saying or doing, you know. There's lots of accusations flying around about them, which is horrible. But like, what I'm saying is like, imagine a tourist goes to Camden, they see zombie punk, and they're like, whoa, that's so cool, I'm gonna go home and learn about punk. And then they go to the local punk scene and they become a punk, and they thrift and they make crust pants. Isn't that awesome, right? It's another young mind in the game. Boom, it keeps your movement alive. That's a winner right there. Unfortunately, not all stereotypes or these poster people can be good people. A lot of the time, I suppose, they're people trying to cash in on looks, which I won't go into just yet because I still want to talk about the positives. I don't want this video to be all doom and gloom. But I do think like the goth one really is a perfect example because that content creator is then using the fact that they do look like the stereotypical goth, you know, the one that like, you know, normies or just curious people will be like, whoa, goth. And then they're using that to educate on their page, which is really cool, you know. That's a perfect example. It's a shame like the hippie ones and the punk ones can't be like that. The ones that, you know, people do interact with a lot, that do get a lot of likes and get a lot of engagement. Shame they're not also fostering these great environments where people can learn and educate themselves. But, you know, we're all on different paths, I guess, is the nice, diplomatic, positive way I would put it, because I'm still on the positive side of this video essay. And that kind of brings me on to my second point of this positive side of the video essay, which is like self-identity and exploration. I think stereotypes can serve as really good, useful starting blocks, starting points in people's journeys for like exploring and finding their real authentic identity. And that is a real great thing that I yap on about in so many of my videos, because I think I found it really tough growing up, just finding something I felt at home in, or finding something I felt comfortability in. And it really is a challenge. And even to this day, if I'm being completely open and honest with you, I still struggle with self-identity. I think I've gotten a lot better at it nowadays, but it's still one that I'm just like, who am I? What am I? You know, like that scene in Zoolander with the water, like, who am I? But it's still one you struggle with. And I think it's one you really, really struggle with when you're a kid and you just want that big thing in life to cling on to. So I think having these stereotypes there to be like, oh, that's cool, or just something that piques your interest, and then you get into it, and then you start expressing yourself via your clothes and stuff, which is a big one when you're younger. I think it's a really good way to go about it. And I know you might be like, but yeah, if they're just looking like it, Cal, then they're a poser, and that's wickety whack, and I don't rate that. Yeah, sure, fine. I guess if they're just looking like it, but what if they just look like it to begin with, and then, you know, they feel good in it, they make them feel confident, makes them feel more at home in their own skin, which is the most important thing in life. You just want to get through life as painlessly as possible. So picture this. Young buck becomes a punk, starts dressing a bit punk. Maybe they get the mohawk for the school disco or the prom, you know. Bit quirky, a bit out there, but they do it maybe slightly in jest, but also because they found it interesting and cool because they saw it on TikTok. And then from that, they're like, yeah, no, this is cool, I like this. Boom, then they start going to the local shows, they start listening to the music. They just start turning up and interacting with more punks. And they get that confirmation of like, yeah, this is cool, and I like the experience. And they start picking up the ideologies, they start making their first pair of crust pants. You see how this all morphs into some great thing of self-expression and awesomeness, and people finding their true authentic self, which I will champion every single time. Everybody starts off as a poser, just trying to find their way. Everybody pretty much just starts off because they're like, yeah, I like the look or whatever. And that is fine, especially in this modern era of social media where things are so pressured to be social media ready. They have to look a certain way if you want people to interact with them, you know, broadly speaking. I know there's some, you know, outliers to that, but broadly speaking, you have to look a certain way in something to get the right reaction, right? Just like in the superficial side, you know, doesn't make you bad at all. It's a normal way to start your journey into self-expression and into these sub-movements, of which at times I've been in. You know, when I was a young buck, I was a little emo, and now I'm just a grown man that doesn't really know what he is. But this is not Therapy Thursdays, and I am not exploring my self-identity, so let's not digress. I just feel anyone that knocks on a person exploring their self-identity and exploring their truth and expression, anyone that knocks on that, I just can't get behind, I can't agree with. Like, who cares if they got their first band tee, their first Slipknot tee or whatever from a big high street store or whatever, you know? What if they like it and then they go home and listen to the music and then they get into the scene that way? You know, let people explore. They don't always have to get it right first time. So what if they were wearing, you know, preppy clothes last summer, and this summer they're in like a Slipknot tee or a band tee and, you know, slightly more alternative clothing. The journey of self-expression is done over your whole entire life. You don't have to nail it in one summer. Thus, people change a lot when they're growing up. I did preppy, I did skater, I did emo, and now I'm this, you know? And my aesthetic and how I express myself and how I present myself to the world and how I think and do will change over time, and this is just normal. Having these very easy signposts there, they can be like, oh, I want to get into this, or I want to get into that. It's really useful and it's really awesome. An anecdotal one I can do is like, I'm very interested in becoming a hybrid athlete. So I've traditionally done weightlifting for years, and I'm seeing these people that can, you know, are aesthetically, they're muscly, but they also really fit and can run lots. And there's these content creators in the TikTok world that do that sort of stuff that I now follow because I'm like, yeah, I want to be like you when I grow up, but I'm probably actually older than them. Oh dear. But you see what I mean? These people being these stereotypical beacons, let's take away whether they're actually good or bad people for a second, but they're just there, can actually be very useful at face value, as long as you don't get too sucked into their ideologies and only just use them as your only point of call, because some of them aren't good, which I've already said like 5 times now, and I don't want to be a broken record. I just don't want you to think I'm condoning anyone's ideologies when they do whack stuff. I'm just saying sometimes it's good for people's curiosities to be piqued about sub-movements from people that may or may not be good humans. Also in like the self-discovery and identity and self-expression point, another good point within that is like community building, having these like obvious signposts of people, maybe not so much in like zombie punk's case, but it's like say like in the goth person's case. I'm so sorry to this content creator, I brought you up so many times, but I think you're just a really good case study of someone that does look the stereotypical way, or at least you do in some videos, and you also make wholesome content, so I can use you as a very good key case study of like how to do it right. But like it will get lots of maybe like young minds or people that are trying to explore the goth sub movement coming there, and they can all talk in the comment sections, and the content creator is very good at answering questions, and that builds a community and fosters education, and that keeps, you know, sub movements alive. People like this are a godsend. It's awesome and it's great to see. It's very selfless stuff. Keep up the good work. And you know, through that, these minds that are trying to find themselves and they're trying to find and express themselves in their authentic way will find a sense of belonging, which is a big part of like self-expression and identity. Just finding somewhere you feel like you're your authentic self. I'm all for that. I like that. I will not have a bad word about people finding themselves on this journey of life. Amen. And I think point 3 of my pros section, which kind of links on from community building, is it makes it easier to find content. You know, stereotypical tags, whether they be like goth, punk, hippie, make it so much easier to find content related to that person's interest or that person's sub-movement that they're trying to learn about. All of these things can help streamline the process of, you know, the person actually learning about that movement, which is a good thing. You know, they'll type in goth and they'll see the goth, they'll type in punk and they'll see the punk, and they're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's what I was looking for, I'm gonna see what they have to say. And I suppose what links in with that is that, like, in the mind, that concept of like instant recognition. Stereotypes often offer a shorthand for a very complex idea. You know, a stereotypical image or label can quickly convey an absolute wealth of cultural information, whether that be positive or negative. You know, at face value, those confirmation biases of, oh, that's a goth, that's a hippie, that's a punk, can be very useful for people that are just dipping their toes into the movements or just getting into it, right? Or at least for like normies to be vaguely aware of different sub-movements, like, oh, okay, that's a goth, or oh, okay, that's a punk, or okay, that's a hippie. And that's not me using normies in a negative sense, by the way. I just mean like the average person that just goes online and scrolls quickly and, you know, that doesn't operate in the alternative world or doesn't, you know, really interact with people from these movements. They'll just see it and be like, oh, okay, that's a goth, I remember that, or that's a punk. Or they might just see something about a punk that's eye-catching and then it's one explaining the history or something, and they're like, oh, okay, that's a random interesting fact that I now know, and I now know more about the movement. All of these things are good, like, signposts to keep people going in the right direction for education and for keeping movements alive. You need those stereotypical characters to just be there, really, I think. And that's kind of what I have to say about the positives of stereotypes within this world. See, look, Cal's been positive in a video. It's not all doom and gloom, but now I've got to get on to the cons and the very real problems of stereotypes on TikToks and what it can mean for sub-movement. Sorry, gang. Chat, it's about to get real negative up in here. Point 1, reinforcement of misconceptions. You know, if someone is just a superficial, shallow stereotype of a sub-movement, and I'm not using shallow in a good or bad way there, just a very neutral version, I just mean they just look the part. That can sometimes only provide a very surface level understanding of the sub-movement, which in turn can lead to deeper misunderstandings and like just general confusion from people that aren't in said sub-movement. For example, lots of people may think a punk has to look like this, or a goth has to look like this, or a hippie has to look like this, when if you actually speak to those people in those communities, and you know, I have from the videos I've done on those sub-movements in recent times, they will tell you the aesthetic is like the least important bit. It's actually always very much about the music and the ideologies. Those are the very big important things, because those are the things that bring people together, not so much how you look, really, because we're all just bags of flesh, and they know that, I know that, we all know that. But you know, the TikTok algorithm doesn't know that. It wants to be able to label and package people and put them a certain way, and that's why you get people like the zombie Camden punk absolutely popping off, because big mohawk, anarchy, and they're a very unique looking human being. You know, you don't really get many human beings looking like that. That's why people travel far and wide to get pictures with a zombie punk. And you know, they have a pretty big social media following because it's a very iconic looking human. But of course, within that, he regularly does things that, you know, aren't considered very punk at all. Like, he even did that thing with a cryptocurrency, and I did see one person argue that crypto is actually very punk because it's fighting classic ways to pay for things. But I don't think it offsets all like the energy and power it requires to mine coins and create cryptocurrency. That's a dilemma in itself, but yeah. And what I'm trying to get at is like, this is how the misconception starts. Because say you're only seeing zombie punk because they're like the very funny commercialized version of punk, like, oh, anarchy, eh? And you know, a lot of people have accused zombie punk of doing bad things. Same with like this hippie person, you know, people are saying they rap about white supremacy and they push white supremacy ideas. And it's the same with, you know, this content creator wearing clip-on locks, which can be linked to cultural appropriation. That can very quickly perpetuate negative stereotypes. So for hippies, it would be, you know, the one you see a lot of people from the OG day saying that weren't in the community, but, you know, saw it. They'll be like, oh no, it's actually just middle-class kids, you know, just doing whatever they want because they had the money and the luxury to, and then they just piss off back to their corporate job in the city afterwards, which isn't a great stereotype to have, you know. And if you just see this like very privileged content creator with like clip-on locks or whatever, it might rub you the wrong way because you're just like, oh gosh, this is just classic, just doing whatever you want because you have the funds and the luxury and the privilege to do so. And I suppose like that could be, you know, when you look at people like TX2, they'll be like, oh my gosh, the punk movement or the emo movement or whatever label they want to use currently, they'll be like, this is so annoying, and it'll give them this really negative view of those movements because they don't like that character, you know. But that's the one that's being shared to their feed because that's the most explosive or creative character that creates the most engagement. It's such a complex one, right? It's like a really obvious example of this is like when I was researching for my punk video, I was talking to like just one of my normal friends about the video, and they're like, oh, punks are really racist, right? And I was like, no, you're getting confused with skinheads. And then we started discussing like lace code and stuff, and they thought that because of all of those things and because of the vaguely similar looks, I know punks would argue it's not a similar look at all, because it's like to the outside world it's vaguely similar and there's not that much education on it, so there's something flying from my face. But because of that, it creates this misconcepts and these confusions around these movements, and they're like, oh yeah, punks are racist. And I was like, oh no, actually they're not. They're pretty much probably the very much opposite. They're very much, you know, inclusivity over exclusivity. But because people see just these stereotype characters, you know, that maybe aren't bringing anything else to the table, this is how these misconceptions do come about and how they're further perpetuated, because there's no big faces and big names being like looking the stereotypical, you know, signpost way and also being like, actually, this is what we're about. Basically being a good role model. There's actually not that many good role models in the world. Where have all the good cowboys gone? And by cowboys, I mean role models. Gosh darn it. But that does bring me on to my next point, which is like the gatekeeping and authenticity. Adhering to strict stereotypes, and by that I mean having to look or having to act a certain way, having to be interested in certain bands and do certain things, creates an environment which is, for a lack of better words, very gatekeepy. You know, it's not very inclusive. And that can happen because sometimes people care so much they get blinded by what is very good intentions inside, but it just comes out as a very negative thing that makes it a very hostile, awkward, uneasy, tough environment for newcomers to thrive in, to be honest. And, you know, because social media does perpetuate this, you know, it does push the people that do look the most social media ready, that does look the part, so they can push it so it farms interactions. Individuals that don't fit the stereotypical image will get excluded or feel excluded because their content may not do as well because, you know, they don't look the part, which is tough going, you know? And, you know, they may be deemed as not authentic from others. Oh, you're not a real goth because you don't have trad makeup on. Or you're not a real punk because where's your cross pants at? Or, you know, you're not a real emo because... Well, actually, I don't really know what makes you a real emo. And I was an emo. Well, at least maybe I was a poser of an emo. I just looked one. I just wore girls' jeans that were so skinny, so tight. Anyways, I don't really know where I'm going with that bit. Useless information. Digression, hey, what's up with that? But because of that, like, and not fitting into stereotypical images, people may feel like a pressure to conform, and that is a privilege, unfortunately, not a right to be able to conform. Not everyone can afford the look, you know, sometimes it can be very expensive, especially if they don't have access to the right thrifting stuff or whatever, which sounds like a very weak point. You're like, what do you mean by doesn't have access to the right thrifting stuff, Cal? So like a young person, their parents might be like, no, you're not allowed to thrift. You have to buy clothes from this store because this is the store we buy our clothes from every year. So pick something out from here, Lil Cal does life. Or, you know, no new clothes for you. And it's like, well, geez, legal guardian, I grew 5 inches over summer. My jeans are now 3/4 lengths and my t-shirts are now crop tops. I look like the Incredible Hulk. Shit's busting on God for real, no cap. So people may feel instantly unwelcomed off the bat. Like, yes, they saw this really cool look. They were enamored by it. I don't know if that's the right word, but they were amazed by it. Like, Zooey mama, I want to be like that when I grow up, or whatever the T's and C's may be. But then they can't, because they're like, oh shucks, I don't have access to the right things to make me look a certain way. Now I feel I can't be part of the group because of this confirmation bias that I've got in my head that you have to look a certain way. You have to be this poster person all the time, which I feel is something a lot of young people would fall into, feeling like you have to present and look a certain way all the time. Because I remember when I was younger, I felt a lot of my totality came from the way I expressed myself visually, so like superficially. And as you get older, you realize your totality isn't really represented by your superficial presentation at all. But you know, when you're younger, and it's not a bad thing, it's just a big part of your life. And they may feel some type of way that isn't really a positive emotion, because they're like, well, I don't have the funds, or I don't have the tools, or I don't have the things to look that way, so does that make me not that thing? It's tough, and that's sad to feel someone getting twisted over something like that, and I can see how it does happen. And you know, if that is the norm, where people do feel they have to conform to the stereotypical look, the stereotypical vibe, to, you know, gain acceptance, doing so actually would stifle personal expression and, you know, diversity in the subculture, which would be such a shame, right? Because the beauty of all these subcultures are, you are doing it differently. And if you actually ask people from those communities, they would always want you to, you know, express yourself how you want to express yourself. Like I've seen in the comment sections of loads of my videos, and I've said this loads of times, but the people are always saying from these subcultures and these sub-movements, it's not about how you look, it's about taking part, supporting the local bands, and just being part of the community. That's what really makes you part of these movements. Just being there, just being present, being a present person, giving back and being part of it all. It's not this exclusive thing of looking a certain way. It's this inclusive thing of just being part of a community, a bigger purpose than yourself. It should be about the whole thing, not just you looking a certain way, right? And that's pretty wholesome to me, I think. And with that wholesome turn of events, that does bring me on to point 3. Commercialization and dilution. Commercial representation is also co-opted by like mainstream media and brands, using that for like selling something for their own gain. So they're hijacking movements to profit off of it, which, you know, would go completely against goth or punk, you know. Especially punk, you know, this do everything yourself culture is now, well, you can get this from Hot Topic and you can look the part, which, you know, completely disregards the original values and meanings to be in said movement, which is pretty problematic, right? But I do want to stress again, if you're in the journey of self-exploration and you're just trying the aesthetic to begin with and taking it from there, you're not doing anything wrong. Express yourself, be your authentic self, it's okay. I've seen young people in my comment sections really worried because they like the punk aesthetic. They just didn't know all the history yet. You can still dress like punk, do your thing. You know, everybody operates at a different speed and how they get into things. Everyone's on their own journey without sounding too like, woo, cows away with the fairies. You know what I mean? I'm just all here for people just doing their own thing, right? It's not that deep. Just don't offend or hurt anyone else doing so, please. Because you'll be like, well, Cow told me I could. And I'll be like, oh, you've misinferred my message, gosh darn it. But I suppose with like the commercialization and the dilution of movements through these stereotypical ideas of these movements being pushed, it can also lead to loss of meaning and identity as a whole, if you get my drift. Like the proliferation of stereotypical imagery can strip these sub-movements of their deeper meanings. I said meanings weirdly there, sorry, I just got so enthusiastic about what I'm talking about. Also, sorry if I've been like quite hype in this video without sounding too like, oh, he's so quirky. I did have multiple cups of coffee before this video, and I seem to act very strongly to stimulants in general. So I've been talking quite fast, and I just really find these topics really exciting. So Sorry if it's been jarring to keep up if you're new here. I'm not always like this, I swear. But reducing these movements to their sheer aesthetics or the sheer way they just look, which is kind of the thing on TikTok. It's just quick videos. You just take it in, scroll to the next one. If you just see it as just this superficial thing, instead of like, you know, these rich, amazing cultural movements that have so much history and good things you can learn from them, which is sad because you're foregoing the real meaning of being punk or the real meaning of being a hippie. You're not spreading peace and love there. You're just spreading, I got this from Shein for $2.99. Link in bio if you want to get it. You're an unethical influencer. I do not stand with you, buckaroo. Do better, please. Thank you. And that, I suppose, is more towards the creators. I suppose if you do have a big platform, you have to acknowledge your privilege and you have to use it in the right ways, right? And I'm not saying be perfect and speak about every injustice going on in the world, but you know, if you are going to be part of, say, like the hippie movement or whatever, maybe don't promote things that, you know, a hippie wouldn't really do, right? And I suppose it's fine if you're a normie and you just see it and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool, because you're not really going to think about the deeper meanings and the deeper implications. But if you represent a movement, you're going to rub up a lot of people in those movements the wrong way, which is totally understandable, right? So just try and be a good person while you're a part of those things, I guess. Don't have to be perfect, but just try not to add to like Creepy Old Man Incorporated, just trying to profit off of sub-movements that were there originally to fight Creepy Old Man Incorporated. And by Creepy Old Man Incorporated, I essentially just mean capitalism and the higher-ups that operate within it. And for my final con on stereotypes on TikTok and how they can negatively impact society, I would like to discuss mental health and its impact on it. Stereotypical standards and imagery can create unrealistic standards for people to live by. People, of course, naturally compare themselves to other people within their community, and that can really do a number on their self-esteem. And though that's not necessarily the content creator's fault, but if as a community, that's the idea being pushed, and that's when we're like building like, yeah, that's so cool, others within the community may feel some type of way. And like I always say, the people in my comment section, or like the regular IRL person will always tell you, you know, it's never that deep, it's never about how you look, but it's just online, the things that get perpetuated the most are the ones that are social media ready. So I can see how people quickly get swept into the world of comparing themselves and feeling inadequate, and they feel they can't be a part of the scene because they don't look a certain way. And I do remember, you know, elder goths and elder punks being like, they don't feel like they would be considered punk anymore or goth anymore because they don't have the time to get ready like they did when they were younger. They had more free time, but when now they're an adult with real adult responsibilities, whether that be a family or full-time jobs, they just don't have the energy all the time. So it must be tough feeling like you're being pushed away from your sub-movement that you love so very dearly just because you don't look a certain way. And that must do a number on the old noggin, the old brain, the old how you be feeling up there, buckaroo. And that in turn creates this really toxic environment. In these movements that are at their heart wholesome good things, it can create this toxic comparison world where you're like, oh, I don't look a certain way or act a certain way, or what if they're doing more than me? Maybe that makes me less of a punk or a goth. And this is such an interesting one because I saw a TikTok recently from a cosplayer being like, when you come up to me and say, oh, I'm the best, I don't know, Freddy Fazbear here, you're way better than the other one I saw, you're actually insulting my friend who I probably know, or it's not a good thing, it's not the good compliment you think it is, it's actually hurtful to the other members of the community. This is just my interpretation of the character. There's no better or worse, unless it's a competition, of course. But it's not, if it's just normal people walking around. Otherwise, it just creates this toxic environment where people feel they're permanently competing with each other. And if you're not in a place of competition, then you're not competing with anyone. Even competing with yourself doesn't even make sense in that moment because you're just having fun and you're just being you and expressing yourself. Now, everything needs to be this competition that I know social media makes it out to be, but in reality, nobody cares. Just like how in reality, realistically, nobody cares if you dress up like a goth or a punk and you don't actually live by the morals. Yes, if you go online and say you do that, of course you're going to rub up people the wrong way because online's an open forum. But if you're walking down the street as a punk, no one's going to be like, let me see your punk card. Let me see you name all 5 bands. Obviously, because nobody cares in real life. Everyone's wrapped up in their own lives. But obviously online people come together to talk and to share ideas and they let off steam there. So that's where you'll get flack. So what I'm saying is like, you know, just go out there and express yourself as you truly want to. Try not to compare yourself to others. I know it's so hard not to, and it's such a wishy-washy thing to say because of course you are. It's a natural thing to do. But understand what you're seeing online isn't seeing someone in totality. You're seeing a very small snippet of someone. So, you know, express yourself how you want to express yourself and be your authentic self. And that is an awesome thing, my friend. The path of discovery and the path of finding out what truly resonates with you. Yes, please do that. For real, no cap on God. Competition within subcultures distracts from the community actually coming together. People having discourse about whether you permanently need to be in trad goth makeup completely takes away from the fact that there's like trad goths out there actually being like, here's how to get into the goth thing, and it's not all about the look, it's about the music. People forget about that because they just focus on the bad thing of being like, oh my god, what a shot, I don't look the part. And then people in the comment sections or just people in real life will be like, it doesn't matter how you look, just enjoy the movement, just have fun. Just do your thing. Be your authentic self. Free your mind. I sound a bit wishy-washy now, so let's conclude on this. I truly think while the presence of stereotypical imagery on platforms like TikTok can bring visibility and foster, you know, real community, which is awesome and I love that, they also risk reinforcing shallow understandings of said movements, exclusivity and commercialization of those sub-movements. And in the case of punk, that would be very bad. So with that, of course, it's crucial to navigate said sub-movements and said conversations around sub-movements with an ethos of promoting inclusivity over exclusivity. And you're probably like, Cal, well, what do you mean by that? You're just saying buzzwords. You sound hella corporate right now, my guy. Well, I just mean understand everything in life comes in different shapes and sizes, different packages, and different presentations. So, you know, one can promote authenticity and self-expression whilst also educating audiences on the deeper aspects of said sub-movements. Basically, by recognizing the strengths and also the drawbacks of stereotypical imagery on social media, we can encourage a more nuanced, and I don't know why I'm stirring a pot, I see this whole thing as a big pot of thoughts and feelings, but we can encourage this nuanced conversation of respectful appreciation of all the diverse ways to present and to be a part of said sub-movements. Say said sub-movements more, Cal, said sub-movements. And with that, I think I'm done yapping. I'm too warm now. These lights are making me sweat. This cardigan's too heavy, and my brain is a bit overwhelmed. So it's time for me to dip and eat some chicken and a coffee. Another coffee. No, I'm not going to have another coffee. But I've been your boy, Cad's Life. Let's talk about this all in the comment section below. I love yapping with you all as a collective. We're a community. For real. I've had fun here. I really enjoy these like sub-movement videos. And I know I can't do them forever because then it would just get boring for everyone. But I'm just really enjoying my time in this space. And I've got to speak to so many awesome people in the comment section, from punks to goths to emos to heavy metal rock stars. You've all been so lovely to me, and you've all, you know, been a great place of education for me. Like, even on things I've gotten wrong, or maybe, you know, things I didn't know enough of, you've all just been there to have conversation, and I love that. You know, as I always say, I don't always want to be right, because I don't always want to be right. That'd be so boring. I just want to learn and have fun with you all in the comment section on this very level playing field of humans. Man, again, why am I talking like Yoda today? Talk we shall. Comment section. That's disgusting. I'm gonna dip now before you will unsubscribe, but there'll be another video essay if you want to check it out. I've been your boy, Cad's Life, and I shall see you in a few more days. Okay, bye.